This is the story of Sawtelle, Japantown, a popular and thriving neighborhood of eclectic restaurants and shops located on the west side of Los Angeles. More importantly, though, this is the story of community. Before World War II, Sawtelle was one of the largest Japanese American communities in the country. Sadly, the community disappeared during the war, but then rebuilt itself after the war to become a thriving Japanese American community once again. How and why did this happen? Our story starts back nearly 100 years ago in the late 1920s.
The Issei, the first generation immigrants came. They could not go to different parts of LA to live. And so they were pretty well restricted to either the farm life or the garden life or produce life. Since they couldn't buy homes, first of all, because they were first generation, and they didn't have kids old enough to be able to buy houses outside of Sawtelle, Sawtelle became a Japantown.
Well, when we moved, Olympic Boulevard was a dirt road. And during those days, most of the area were bean fields.
One of the good things about the Japanese community was that people wanted to be gardeners.
In 1923, that was a going thing for Japanese here. Up in Brentwood and Westwood, Beverly Hills, they all needed gardeners real bad. And the Japanese were the only ones that knew anything about gardening. And my dad moved to West Los Angeles, or what was called Sawtelle at the time. He moved into Sawtelle to become a gardener, which was a new type of occupation at that time.
West LA was a community of gardeners and nurseries. I think in 1932, they opened up a nursery on Pico and Pontius, and it's called a Pansy Garden.
And there was several nurseries. One was at the Sawtelle Boulevard, still there, Hashimoto Nursery. There was one in Pico Boulevard, Kubota. This is before the war now.
You had people coming in without any place to live because they couldn't buy places right away, restrictive LA City ordinances. You couldn't buy in Westwood, you couldn't buy in Beverly Hills, you couldn't buy in Brentwood. They had a lot of boarding houses.
They started the boarding house back early 20s. During the peak years, we probably had 50 or 60 boarders. And I'd say 95% of the people that lived there were gardeners.
Sawtelle became a Japantown, sort of a conclave, and they established their institutions within that. So one of those was Japanese language instruction.
My grandparents moved to Sawtelle in the early 1920s. My grandfather, Gisuke, had 3 sons, and he had been active in the church and with Japanese language. And then they started having Japanese language classes at his home. That was the start of the Japanese Institute of Sawtelle, known as the JIS. So they started having classes in 1925, and then they founded the JIS in 1929. So he is credited with being the founder of the JIS. Somehow the Christians and the Buddhist families all got together, and they raised enough money to buy a small piece of land on Corinth. And they did the work to refurbish the insides of the buildings, and then they did the yard work and so forth. And then they had a opening day, and there's this picture of the opening day, and there's all these children just a huge number of children. I'm sure all these children walked there. They all lived in the neighborhood. And it's from both religions and probably other people who aren't affiliated with any church. Anyway, that was the start of the Japanese school. And they established a mission to make sure that the Japanese cultural arts do not get forgotten in Sawtelle. And so those strongly would include the Japanese language school, which became one of the strong points of the area, but also to teach all the members other Japanese cultural arts. So in that sense, be a community organization.
In 1941, I was working one Sunday morning, doing some work in the garage, and I had the radio on, and I heard about this Pearl Harbor bombing. And of course, surprised to me, I didn't even know what was going on. And well, I guess it was a shock.
We were shocked. We didn't know what to say. So we just went home and tried to listen to the radio, and that was about it. We didn't know what was going to go on after that.
Okay, December 7th, we went to the movie. I brought my brother Jack with me. And when the movie ended, I was walking home, and I see all these, you know, how they used to yell out on to sell the paper. Well, they said that Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. And I don't know, for some reason, I grabbed my brother and we just ran home.
My father was involved in the Japanese community, and that's why when the war started, a lot of the East States that were involved in the Japanese community was picked up by the FBI for no real good reason at all, you know.
When I came home, I saw my mother crying, and I looked around the house and everything was in shambles, everything. They just tore up the place. And we didn't know where our father was. All we know is that the FBI took him in.
I said, well, where are they going to take us? What's going to happen to us? And there was a lot of rumor was going on. People got picked up by FBI, and we didn't know what we're going to have to, what they're going to do to us, but just go along, I guess.
I kept going to junior high school, and I didn't feel any prejudice. The teacher treated me very well. One of the strictest teachers took me out in the hall, and he just had tears in his eyes. He said, I feel so sorry for you guys. Mr. Donovan, and I still remember his name. We heard that we're going to be interned.
When we had to relocate, my mother had a real rough time. Well, I kind of grew up, I guess, you know, I knew I had to help my mom. She had to get rid of all the merchandise, you know, the beddings and stuff in the hotel, which she got hardly anything. My father's car was only about a year or two. He had a Buick, and I think my mother sold it for a few $100s.
We had a nursery on Sawtelle Boulevard, and I remember we had to get rid of all our stocks, the cars, the furnitures, and everything else. That was pretty sad.
The buses to take people to Manzanar came to GIS, and all the people came to GIS to congregate to get on the buses.
We were on the bus, and we didn't know where we were going. They won't tell us where we were going. When we arrived, that was the Manzanar camp.
It was late afternoon. It was very windy. April 26th, it's cold and windy. And I looked out the window, I saw, well, she must have been a teenager. She had boots on, she had a heavy jacket on. I said, oh my gosh, is that how we're going to be? That was my first impression of being in Manzanar.
Oh my God, with all the dust and all that. Don't tell me we have to live here for how long. Oh my God, this is a heck of a place they're going to put us in. Not only us, there were so many hundred people.
Oh, you see the desert and the barbed wire fence.
Oh, there was nothing in the barracks. Had to start figuring out where we're going to sleep, How are we going to sleep? I remember going out to the wood pile. They had a lot of wood because the barracks weren't even completed yet. So I just took some wood and started making chairs and tables and things like that. But first of all, I had to go get some army cots and fill the mattresses with straw, whatever. It's just to get the family started. I wasn't angry as much as the fact that we had to find a way to live. How are we going to live? How are we going to adapt to this old place? Terrible place. And unfinished barracks and hot sun. And so you can rebel all you want, was my feeling, but nobody's going to come and help you. So you got to figure out how you're going to adapt.
It's amazing how Japanese Issei and Nisseis, were able to convert a bare land into a whole, flower garden and vegetable garden. It didn't take them long to do that.
They fed us 3 times a meal.
I used to get to go with my friends. We used to eat together. I never ate with my parents.
My mom was given the job of block manager. So I'm sure Henry too was helping my mother, delivering mail, newspaper for the block.
The block library was at the other end of the block, and so I used to go there quite often to look at books, check out books, whatever. But then gradually, as I got to know the people, we started playing basketball or different sports activities. So athletics became part of the routine.
Besides that, during the daytime, we used to play basketball, baseball, trying to keep ourselves busy.
We could be playing in the evening until time for bed, unless we had to study, of course.
I think the internment, to really appreciate what really happened, you have to live it like we did. We lived it.
When I left the camp, that was October 29, 1945. But we were there for about 3.5 years. That was a pretty long war. It was kind of miserable for everybody. People that went in the camp, the people that was in the army, but after the war, I guess things got better. Right after the war, we didn't feel too good because when I'm driving a car for no reason, I got stopped by police. So I said, what did I do? I said, I'm checking all your Japs. Then I told him, why you stop me? He said, we have to check you. I said, oh, okay. I didn't want to argue and get thrown in a jail. And I found out his brother or somebody was killed in war. So I guess he had something against Japanese.
We used to walk to school every day. And that's when we used to be called Jap and everything, going to school, We had to, don't create waves. Huh? You don't hit anybody. We just got out of camp. So you just took it. You just took it. Yeah.
Back then I had 2 sisters, older than myself, and my parents, who ran a boarding house. Kobayakawa, which became the name of the boarding house. It was right directly after the war, and the war sentiment was very heavy. And when they first noticed these 2 Japanese back in that mess hall building, they threw rocks and eggs, and they broke the front window. And it so happened that my dad's friend had 3 sons in the service, 2 of which died with the 442. Back then, if you had sons in the service that died, you're allowed to put a little flag up with gold stars, which meant you lost 2 sons. And they placed it right where the rock came through the window, these 2 stars. And dramatically, following the 2 stars, things just stopped. Overnight, it just stopped. And then he had a friend over in Manzanar. So he contacted that party, told him that if there's anybody that want to return, he's back. By the way, he was the first one back. And my God, the community started all over again. So it became the West LA Sawtelle ethnic Japanese American community all over again.
Like many other Nisei children in Sawtelle, after elementary school, on the same street, Corinth, I would be at the Japanese Language Institute, Monday through Friday, 1 hour at Nihonko Gakko, Japanese Language School. And on Tuesday and Thursday nights, it was in the same building, in the auditorium, it was Sawtelle Judo Dojo. And I also remember every few months being dragged by my parents to go see black and white Japanese movies being shown. And the auditorium was packed because these were reasonably fresh movies from Japan, all in Japanese, tailor-made for the Japanese Issei audience in Sawtelle. What I saw on the 2000 block of Sawtelle Boulevard was really like an extension of the Japanese Language School and the West LA Buddhist Temple. It was all together a social and retail and a service center for my parents and their Issei friends who could not speak English.
My memories of West LA United Methodist Church was very good. It was a gathering for the Isseis where they could share each other's sorrows and pleasures and get together.
All the dynamics of Japanese Americans coming in and building their own enterprises. They had their own institutions, churches, and social organizations. And so Sawtelle really was a dynamic place. People needed a place to eat, a place to rest, a place to get their services taken care of.
My mother and father bought a property, on Sawtelle there, and she opened up the variety store. We were known for our ice cream and candy. All the kids in the neighborhood used to come in, especially Japanese school kids, from Sawtelle Institute there. And they weren't allowed to come during school hour, but they always used to sneak out and shop at our place. So most of our kids that grew up in that area, they knew us.
We started to increase the size of the stores, and then we started to carry a lot of more school supplies and dry goods, and of course it made the store twice as big. And
at the corner of Sawtelle and LaGrange, on the southeast corner, was a hamburger taco stand owned by Lonnie Ketchia.
It probably didn't take up more than 20 by 20 or 30 by 30 on the corner, just a little stand with a row of stools encircling the front.
And that was one of the meeting spots for many boys my age on our bicycles. We could go there and for 25 cents buy a wonderful hamburger or a taco.
the tacos, tamale, chili dogs, lived on it.
My father bought the building on the corner of Sawtelle and Mississippi around 1957. The store was very busy and it catered to the West LA community pretty much. This was before the popular chains, took over. So he was really the corner drugstore. He was open till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, but because the store was so close, I actually hung out there a lot and would go have dinner with my dad in the drugstore and, just sit around and just see everybody coming in. I think that Sawtelle was a real community at that time still. I used to be able to walk around at all hours of the night. 9 o'clock was no big deal. I always felt safe. If I was hungry, I could just go over to Osho was there and ask them to make me something. Futaba restaurant was there, and I didn't feel like Japanese food, and I'd ask them to make me a sukiyaki sandwich, and they would do that for me. My father would let me charge everywhere when I was little, and he would go pay my bills on the first of the month up and down the block to see what I've charged up. I felt like I knew almost everybody on the block in those days, and they were extended aunties and uncles in a way. They all knew what was going on. But of course, that's what makes the community sort of special.
Gradually, Sawtelle, Japantown of Japanese-owned shops started to go down, and that's what it is today. Very few shops are owned by Japanese Americans who originally were in Sawtelle.
When we decided to retire, we put up for sale, and we found a fellow that was really interested in the Sawtelle area. He's an Australian Jew, but his wife used to come to a store when she was a kid.
He told us, after I fix it up, can I use the name Yamaguchi? Yamaguchi Plaza or whatever. And Henry said, oh, go ahead. Just to keep it more, for Sawtelle, more Japanese, I guess. That was one of the things we kind of stressed, that we wanted more Japanese. To sell that store, I was kind of hurt. I just couldn't let it go. I just couldn't let them, I always wanted to keep it, and,
Tremendous change, tremendous change. It is different. It's amazing when you're out there Saturday night or so. All the young Japanese up and down. Can't even park in front of our house anymore. It's always filled with traffic.
It's kind of like a restaurant row now.
It's not just Japanese food. There's Korean places, Vietnamese, all nationalities. And it's young people. Lots of young people coming from all over the city to go there.
And as far as the changes on Sawtelle, the merchants today, I think they're quite successful in the restaurants, but they have no idea the struggles that the Issei's had when they were establishing the Japantown on Sawtelle. They met prejudice and, just really hardship. I think if our Issei's were to walk down that street, they would be surprised to see what has happened.
Well, I hope it stays there, as a Japanese community, but I don't know.
The community now is drastically changed.
I think we who lived there before have to just recognize the fact that it's a changing tide, and what will it become later? Do we want an identity as a Japantown or not? And if it is, then who's going to step up to the plate to keep it Japantown?
If they show this is a Japanese town, and teach kendo, those things, but tea ceremony, dancing, and they should have a school, and I bet you a lot of other, you will attract. But if they stop that, then it's just gonna go away.
I know that, all things change, and a lot of it has to do with the community changing. It's no longer just Japanese Americans. I like the fact that people knew each other. There was a time as a child I knew everybody on both sides of my street. I think it's important to know your neighbors, to talk to whoever new is moved in, that it's great to have this extended community.
I just hope whatever we can learn from these particular experiences that young people will take it to heart. We're an evolving population. We cannot continue to be isolated in our own way and build walls. I think we have to be much more inclusive and try and bring in people to help us
It's sad for people who live in, say, condo complexes or something, where you're just coming up from your cars in the garages through an elevator and you don't really see your neighbors. It's just a hallway. But growing up where I grew up, and even where I live now, I mean, you say hello to your neighbors. And, that you feel comfortable to walk over and say, do you happen to have an extra shovel or whatever you need? That your neighbors are not just people who live 2 doors down, but they're somebody that you could feel comfortable coming into your house or feeding the cat when you're out of town. So that's community. Whether it's a Japanese community or not, community is important.
Yes, community is important. As we've seen in this story, community has been so important to the people of Sawtelle, Japantown. Before the war, they started from nothing and built up a strong community. Then after the war, they started again from nothing and rebuilt an even stronger Japanese-American community. This story has been about the importance of community, not just in Sawtelle, Japantown, but for everyone across America. Our communities today might not be the same as in the past. A lot of us don't even know our next-door neighbors these days. But still, our communities, at work, with friends, and online, are extremely important parts of our lives. Today, Sawtelle, Japantown is evolving into a modern-day community. Although it may look different from the past, Sawtelle, Japantown can still remain an important community to everyone who lives, works, and visits there, just as long as we remember that community is important.